was watching a butterfly flitting around the other day, just marveling at its exquisite beauty, and I got to wondering, where does the name butterfly come from? It almost seems like it's a misnomer or malapropism or even a spoonerism. And in the back of my mind, I think I kind of always assumed that it was. That maybe someone was trying to say flutterfly to describe the way they flutter about, but instead, as they had bugs on the brain, they mistakenly said buh instead, and out came butterfly, and it just stuck. Or even better, maybe it was a spoonerism, and someone said, wow, did you see that beautiful insect flutter by? And flutterby then got transposed into butterfly. Because I couldn't see much connection with butter, but it does seem like butter's indeed the connection, not a spoonerism with flutter, because other languages connect it to butter as well. For example, in Low German, it's Butterlicker, literally butter liquor, and in German, it's Molkendieb, or that means a thief of whey, as in the whey from Little Miss Muffet sitting on her tuffet eating her curds. Or take Dutch, where it's butterscheid, literally butter excretion. So apparently there was once some kind of belief that butterflies ate milk or butter, or that they excreted some kind of butter-like substance. Or maybe it was just simply that the name first got applied to those yellowish or orangish butterflies that are kind of the color of butter. Or perhaps it's just that butter is awesome, makes everything better, and butterflies are awesome too and make the world a better place, so it makes sense to call them butterflies. Who knows? But whatever the source, butterflies are special, as anyone who's seen a monarch or swallowtail or painted lady or any butterfly really flitting about can attest to. And they're special enough that there's a whole underground smuggling and poaching scene, with single specimens of rare butterflies selling for thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars. And that specialness is reflected in our language as well, as we have a few idioms about butterflies. So welcome to Idiom America, where we'll take a look in this episode at those, as well as some idioms connected to butterfly's namesake, good old butter. The first butterfly idiom is the widely used idiomatic metaphor, butterflies in my stomach, which so perfectly and vividly captures that nervous and excited feeling that you get as a physical sensation of fluttering or churning feeling in the gut. Before every court appearance, I get butterflies in my stomach. And because this one is just so spot on and intuitive in how it describes the feeling, I expected it to date back further than it does. The plot for this one on Google's Ngram is interesting, and Ngram, of course, tracks the usages of words and phrases in a vast collection of books and documents and other textual sources for centuries, and allows one to explore how language trends have changed over time. And butterflies in the stomach appeared a few times around 1900, and then they disappeared for 40 years, and then in the late 1930s it started to appear again. But it wasn't until about the year 2000 that this one really became super popular. So that just goes to show, I guess, how even a spot-on descriptive idiom like butterflies in one's stomach can take a century before it gains widespread popularity. And another widely popular butterfly idiom is social butterfly, which refers, of course, to a sociable, outgoing person, somebody who flits from one social event to another, much like a butterfly does with flowers. And it's generally a positive idiom, but it sometimes can carry a connotation of superficiality or lack of depth in relationships, as the person may be seen as more focused on quantity of social interactions rather than quality. And it also seems to be used more to describe women for some reason, although it can be used for men too. And maybe this has something to do with another idiomatic simile, gaudy as a butterfly, to describe something very colorful, flashy, or showy, often in a tasteless or overdone way. And I was surprised to see social butterfly has been around longer than butterflies in my stomach, since the 1830s. As for some reason it seemed like more of a Johnny-come-lately butterfly idiom. But maybe that's just because I heard and related to the phrase butterflies in my stomach as a kid in a way that I wouldn't have related to social butterfly. And one butterfly idiom that is a true newcomer, one that arrived on the wings of modern science, is the butterfly effect. And this one originates in the 1960s in the field of chaos theory, and it refers to the concept that small changes in initial conditions can lead to vastly different outcomes when you're in a complex system. And specifically, it came from the weather context, and a guy named Edward Lorenz, a meteorologist, who demonstrated how tiny variations in weather model input could drastically alter the predicted outcome. And this discovery led Lorenz to ponder whether the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil could, through a series of complex interactions, eventually lead to a tornado in Texas. And the small input of the air being disturbed by a butterfly's wings could cause a whole series of chain reactions that could result in a tornado a continent away is pretty wild, but true. And it should be noted that some people postulate that this idiom arose from a 1952 Ray Bradbury short science fiction story, A Sound of Thunder, in which a time traveler goes back 66 million years and accidentally steps on a butterfly, which results in an altered timeline upon his return. But like this podcast keeps repeating, the thing about idioms is that they're often the convergence of a few different ideas. So I'm sure the background of this story, if nothing else, helped Lorenz's butterfly flapping its wings take off as an idiom. And apparently in the UK, there's an idiom to break a butterfly on a wheel, which means to use far more force than is necessary to do something. And I'd never heard that one used in America, though. Here we'd probably use the idiom to kill a gnat with a sledgehammer to convey the same idea. But to break a butterfly on a wheel does have an interesting history. It alludes to breaking on the wheel, which was a form of torture in which victims had their long bones broken by an iron bar while tied to a large wooden spoked wheel. It came from a quotation from Alexander Pope in 1735. And so looking around here for a transition to the idiom "suck it up, buttercup," and saying that it might be something to say to someone being tortured on the wheel seems way too callous, even though the last known execution by the wheel took place in Prussia back in 1841. So maybe we can segue instead by talking about how one flower the butterfly might visit is to, when it wants to get some nectar to drink, is the buttercup. Because it's true, butterflies do love buttercups, as they produce a sugary nectar that they love to dip their proboscis in to have a sip. And suck it up, buttercup, of course, is a rhyming way to tell someone to deal with an unpleasant situation or hard truce without complaining about it. Deal with it, even if it's difficult and you don't like it. And the underlying idiom here is suck it up, with the buttercup just being a relatively recent addition. Where does the idiom suck it up come from? One theory for its origin is that it was slang from World War II pilots. If a pilot vomited into their oxygen mask, they had to suck it up, meaning to literally inhale it, or else you'd risk breathing the acidic fumes, which could be fatal. The theory goes. Another theory is that it's a variation of suck up your chest, meaning to take a deep breath, compose yourself, stand tall, and then proceed. But whatever the case, the addition of the rhyming buttercup is pretty recent. It wasn't until 2006 that the first usage appears on Google's Ngram, but it's skyrocketed in popularity since then, relatively speaking. And I like this one myself and use it a fair bit. Not only does it have rhyme going for it, but it also kind of insults the person who needs to suck it up, accuses them of being too fragile, too precious, like a dainty little buttercup. Like during COVID, oh, I'm so sorry you have to wear a mask when you go out in public. Suck it up, buttercup. I don't like it either, but it's not that big a deal. And unlike the majority of butterflies, butterflies actually do resemble butter with their bright yellow color. And besides that yellow color and being delicious, something else butter is known for is being soft, as reflected by the simile soft as butter, or the metaphor cut through something like a hot knife through butter. Neither of which I think qualifies as an idiom, since they're too straightforward in meaning. Butter wouldn't melt in one's mouth is a proverb or metaphor that's solidly in idiom territory, however, and thus deserves to have its meaning and origin examined. And this one is used to refer to someone who's overly coy or demure, insincere, maybe someone who's so cool that butter inside their mouth wouldn't melt. Maybe they're icily prim and proper. She acted as though butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, but we all knew that she was the one who'd spread the rumor. And it's usually used in a derogatory and critical sense, and in the past at least, again, was most often applied to women, implying a certain emotional coldness. Although that seems to be changing somewhat, and it's becoming more equally applied to all genders. And I was surprised by how old the origin of this one is. For some reason, I thought it would be a modern one, but instead, its roots go back to at least 1562, where the phrase was listed as a proverb in the work The Proverbs and Epigrams of John Haywood. It also appears in a 1530 work of French terms translated into English, so this one goes back a long way in at least two languages, which is a testament, I think, to its status as a great idiom. Another proverb or observation that's idiomatic enough to examine is the idiom bread always falls on the buttered side, talking about how if you drop a slice of buttered toast, it's always going to land on that buttered side. And this is a way of describing bad luck, or the tendency for the worst possible outcome to occur in any situation. Pessimism, basically. And it's a specific instance of Murphy's Law, which states that if anything can go wrong, it will. In other words, if something has a chance of going wrong, it will likely go wrong in the most inconvenient way. And this one has been around for at least 150 years, if not longer, and may have been popularized by a little poetic ditty from English novelist and editor James Payn in 1884 that went, "I never had a slice of bread, particularly large and wide, that did not fall upon the floor, and always on the buttered side." And scientists have actually spent time analyzing the phenomenon, and they've concluded that a piece of buttered toast does fall more often on the buttered side, but that this has to do with math involving rotation speed and table heights, and not from the fact that the butter, which is mostly soaked into the center of the bread anyway, would affect the aerodynamics or the gravity or anything like that. And a guy actually won the 1996 Ig Nobel Peace Prize for Physics for his solid work on this. And it's also led to the buttered cat paradox, which asks, if toast always lands buttered side down and cats always land on their feet, what would happen if a slice of toast were attached butter side up to the back of a dropped cat? And then there's also a joke about the Jewish housewife who was amazed at a slice of bread falling buttered side up one morning, contrary to the idiom. And so she went and consulted the elders at the synagogue, and after some time they concluded, "Madam, the problem is that you have buttered the wrong side of the bread." Buttered bread also features in a couple more idioms. First, there's the simple classic bread and butter, as in she loved playing in her band, but teaching violin was her bread and butter. And here, bread and butter means someone's main source of income or livelihood, the things that provide them with the means to live, and that's the primary way that this one's used. It can also refer to something fundamental or necessary for a particular situation, like a specific skill or area of knowledge, as well as something solid, reliable, and practical. John Stockton's bread and butter was running the pick and roll with Malone. Finally, it can be used as an adjective, especially in politics, to refer to issues or matters that are the ones which are most important to most people because they affect them personally. Bernie Sanders is an effective politician because he focuses on the bread and butter issues like jobs, healthcare, and income inequality. And as you might expect, this one's been around for a while, a few centuries at least, and its origin is pretty obvious, coming from the historical importance of bread and butter as basic essential food. And there's also the idiom to know on which side your bread is buttered, meaning to know who to be nice to and what to do in order to get an advantage for yourself. Congress just passed a big tax cut for the wealthy at the expense of health care for the poor. They know which side their bread's buttered on. And like the idiom, butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, this one also appears in a collection of John Haywood proverbs, this time one from 1546, when he quotes, "Thou knowest not who doth ye harm, who doth ye good. Yes, yes, quoth she, for all those wise words uttered, I know on which side my bread is buttered." And this came smack dab in the middle of the ongoing battle for ascendancy between the Catholics and Protestants, and so backing the right horse, knowing which side would butter your bread, was a key question of the day. And for those who couldn't pick a faction, there's the idiom to want one's bread buttered on both sides, meaning to want something more than is practicable or reasonable to expect, to have one's cake and eat it too. And finally, there's the variant to have one's bread buttered for life, meaning one set up pretty nicely. And one slang idiom that might seem like it has a connection to butter, but doesn't, is butterface, which is a disrespectful and offensive way to describe a person, again, usually a woman, who has an attractive body but an unattractive face. And the term is a play on the phrase, but her face, implying that everything else is good except the facial features. And the origin of this term stems from people making comments about someone's physique while simultaneously criticizing their face. For example, someone might say, "She has a great body, but her face." And the "but her face" part is what eventually evolved into butterface. And finally, there's the idiom to butter someone up, meaning to flatter someone or be excessively nice to them in order to gain their favor or get something you want from them. So where does this one come from? Well, the prevailing theory is that it comes from ancient India and the use of ghee, or clarified butter, that stuff that's left after water's been evaporated and milk solids separated from butterfat. And it's been used in ancient religious rituals and traditional medicine since ancient times in India, where it was a common practice to spread or to throw it, according to some accounts, these small balls of ghee butter onto sculptures that represented various deities during a time of worship. And this offering was intended to secure favors from these deities, such as good fortune, abundant crops, peace, and health. And the custom goes back as far back as 1600 BC. And the second possible explanation for the origin of to butter someone up is one that suggests, without much evidence, that it comes from the fact that smothering someone in flattery makes them nicer and more susceptible to gentle coercion, the same way that smearing butter on bread makes it smoother and tastier, gently coercing it into your stomach. I don't know, maybe. My own theory is that it might have something to do with similar idioms like grease the skids, or grease the wheels, or grease the gears, which are all idioms meaning to make things run more smoothly. Paramount greased the skids to make sure its merger with Skydance got approved by firing Colbert from the CBS late night show and settling a baseless lawsuit by Trump against 60 Minutes for $16 million. But whether you're buttering someone up with flattery or greasing the skids with bribery, in both cases you're kind of lubricating a situation to get what you want. So it makes sense to me that these all kind of evolved together. And speaking of grease and butter and ghee and other yummy fats, that's all for now, which is a spoonerism for that's all for now. Keep your eyes peeled for beautiful creatures fluttering by, and your ears open for beautiful idioms fluttering about. Thanks for listening.